All right, this is Scott Levy. I would welcome everyone to the Byram Hills Board of Education meeting on March 31st, 2020. I call this meeting to order. We met in executive session at 7:13 and completed executive session at 8:40. I would just point out that we spoke about one item in executive session. It was item 2.1, contract matter negotiations, and that is an amendment from the original agenda. With that, I would ask everyone to stand and say the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Before we head into tonight's agenda, I would just ask if there are any comments from the public regarding any items that are not on tonight's agenda. Oh, Tim, just take off your mute.
There are no questions from the public.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So with that, I would ask for a motion to adopt the revised agenda with that one change to the executive session item.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so that was Ira and Mia. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. So with that, why don't we tackle our first item of business tonight, which is item 6, special report budget hearing 4. And with that, I would turn it over to Jen and to Kelly.
Okay, I will get started. Good evening, everyone. Kelly will be sharing his screen and we will be looking at slides of the budget hearing 4 taking place tonight. It is important to note to the public that any kind of voting on this budget or voting of trustees has been postponed to at least June. We are told to June point, and we will get more clarification on that. That is important to note because in this environment, I think many school districts are going to see, as we have seen, your budget beginning to evolve and take a different shape. To our community members, it's very important to know that our Finance Advisory Committee, consisting of Mia DiPietro, Mike Sanders, and our board president, Scott Levy, have been meeting quite often to review various components of the budget and also to review the financial standing of the district. This is very important. And we have shared that information and had discussions with our audit committee, which consists of the entire board. Specifically, we've really, and Kelly will get to some slides referring to this in a bit, but the Finance Advisory Committee really reviewed all of the collateral information for banks that the district uses, letters of credit, questions we need to ask about accounts and federal backing, which is important, and we were happy to hear the results. We adjusted our budget to account for decrease in, let's say, sales revenue. We are, at this point as a district, looking to scale back on any discretionary construction. Obviously, almost no construction can be occurring right now except for as specified by law. But the district is even looking at discretionary construction moving forward, not just this edict right now until April 15th. We're looking at holding on specific projects that we were doing. I know that we had looked into air conditioning and a rollout in the past. We had looked into a new driveway at the high school. It is just not the time for the district to be considering those projects. So we are holding on all of those ideas for now, anything that is not necessary and mandatory. The Finance Advisory Committee took quite a few different looks at the tax levy cap, recalling that our tax levy cap was at 1.54. And then we had many discussions and brought that tax levy cap to 1.4. And now you will see that we have made an even greater adjustment to that tax cap levy tonight at a 1%. And that at some point means that close to $500,000 that ordinarily would come into the school budget from the taxpayers is now going to not come into the school district. We recognize the effect that the recent situation has had on all of our taxpayers, on our school district, on each individual family. And it is time that the district took again, another close look at that. And we want to be responsive not only to the community, but we also have to think about the longevity of this school district, our enrollment, and projects that keep our district in a good position. Recall that many of our neighbors who have gone out for bonds in the past 2 years or so have gone out for those bonds because they have not done maintenance in their districts over time. And we always have been very good about that. We will continue to be vigilant about our maintenance, but we have to be we have to scrutinize what projects we think should be happening at this point. So thank you to the Finance Advisory Committee. A reminder that your Board of Education members are here in a voluntary capacity. And in addition to dealing with their own family matters and business matters, they've devoted a lot of time to really working through this budget that Kelly's going to describe tonight. So just on, Kelly shared his screen for the administrator's proposed budget tonight. You will see that we have a 0% budget to budget increase. The times that were originally on the next slide, which were like our timeline of all of the different board meetings, you do know that we are not looking anymore for the May budget adoption. And we could see a change in some of these timelines also pending what we hear moving forward regarding the fact that we are not looking to have this budget voted on according to the commissioner's executive order at this time. So Kelly, I think I will move to you to start talking about the components. And this, for everybody who may be watching, this is very much a review of what we have had in the last few meetings. But Kelly has put a slide up to talk specifically about the matters that I referred to for the Finance Advisory Committee. So it's written there for people to see. Kelly?
Thank you. So just as a review, if you review the previous presentation, this information hasn't changed. This is the three components of a school district budget: your program budget at 72.3%, capital at 16.3%, and the administrative portion at 11.4%. So in terms of by object, the majority of our expenses with any school district is your salary and benefits of your staff. That's 77.5%. The second largest category, contractual services. This is essentially everything that we can't do in-house, our boiler maintenance, if we contract out for professional development, BOCES, anything related to that is contractual services. That's at 14.7%. Supplies and equipment, 2.1%. Debt service, again, that's a big reduction from the prior year with the expiration of the bond this year. That's at 3.2%. Our maintenance projects at 1.9%, and finally our vehicles at a 0.6%. So this is a slide that has changed since the prior meeting, since our meeting last week. The real property tax, our local taxpayers supporting the budget, is 88%. When we reduced the tax levy from 1.4 to 1.0, that percentage went down about 1%. It was 89% last week, and now it's 88%. State aid still maintaining at 5%. Payment in lieu of taxes at 3%. Fund balance appropriation, that's an increase. That increased about 1%. It was 2% last week. It's 3% now. And then finally, other revenues at 1%. As Jen spoke to before, through the Finance Advisory Committee, we met on multiple occasions and we discussed some various reductions in terms of assumptions for revenue. We started this process in January. We made an assumption of sales tax at $725,000. At that time, since Westchester County increased the sales tax of additional 1%, we were getting as much sales tax as we ever received in the district. So when we were budgeting at that time in January, we had increased that number based on the discussions with Finance Advisory and kind of projecting out for this year and going into next year. We did reduce that to $543,750. We also had a discussion about interest. Again, in January, our interest rates were higher than they've been in the past. They were working their way down in January, but prior to that, were very large. We were seeing a lot of interest earnings. Based on the changes that have occurred in the last couple of weeks, we made an assumption to reduce that from $150,000 to $25,000. We had a lot of discussion about the tax levy and how that's going to impact each of our towns at individual tax rate. And as Jen spoke about, we originally started with a max tax levy of 1.54% based on the formula. Last week, we had a 1.4% discussion with the tax levy, and tonight we're proposing a 1%. We further discussed our liquidity in terms of our funds, the banking institutions that we use. We are diversified with our funds in terms of banks. We discussed the collateral associated with each of our banks. I'm comfortable with that balance and where we are. We are completely collateralized, and we did make an adjustment for one of our bank accounts to just confirm that. And finally, as Jen spoke about, we are going to put hold some of our non-essential building projects for next year, and that's something we can further discuss as we have additional meetings.
I have a question for you, Kelly.
Yes.
And I agree with the last bullet point. Obviously, makes sense in the current time. But do we have committed but unspent capital money in the budget?
Committed but unspent.
In other words,
yes.
that was.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
For the current year?
I'm just, if that money was incurred, approved in prior budgets, hasn't been spent, I don't know if that necessarily would militate against it being spent now to do those projects, since that money has already been approved by the voters. If that's the case, I don't know.
It has been approved, but we do have discretion on those spending.
Yeah.
In some instances, we'll budget for a project and then we'll do the bidding process, and the bids will come out, much larger than we had budgeted or what we anticipated.
Yeah.
But we do have the ability to hold on projects that we're currently we're thinking about doing, such as Jen spoke about, such as HVAC.
Do we have any projects that have been approved by SED where there's any time frame on us having to do it by a certain date?
Fortunately not. We don't. We do the window projects at Coleman Hill and the high school, a sign project at the high school for the new sign. Those have all been up at SED and have been approved. We do have 2 years until we have to essentially restart the process, meaning send the specs back up and have them approved. So we have a 2-year lag with those.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, and then this reflects the change of the tax levy. Again, last time we spoke, it was at 1.4%. Now we're at 1.0% for tax levy. That's an $828,253 increase. Again, decrease for pilots about 5.86%. Additional revenue that was based on the assumptions that we corrected or revised in terms of interest and county sales tax. So we're at about a $75,000 decrease there. State aid, again, that we're going to have a lot of discussions on that. The legislature should be meeting right now and finalizing the budget. It's due actually tomorrow, April 1st. So we'll see if that actually comes through. Once we get that run from our legislatures, we'll make the adjustment for state aid. Right now, we don't know if that's going to be a reduction, an increase. So once we get that run, we'll make an adjustment there. Right now, these numbers are based on the governor's run that was provided, early February before everything kind of happened. So that's a decrease of $54,000, and that's just essentially due to we no longer have a bond payment that we're going to get state aid on. So again, that's something we can look at the next presentation. And then finally, fund balance. This increased from the prior presentation because we were projecting or proposing a 1.4% in tax levy. Now that we're at a 1% tax levy, the difference in tax levy was made up by additional fund balance being allocated to the budget. So last time we spoke, it was about 26% decrease. It was about 2.4 million, and now we're at 2.7 million. And then the changes associated with the tax rate. So again, at 1%, you see the reductions here. The North Castle increase last time we spoke was about 0.74%. Now it's a 0.34%. Newcastle was at 2.79. Now it's at 2.39. Bedford was at 0.95. Now it's at 0.55. And then finally, Mount Pleasant was at 3.99, and now it's at 3.58. Now, again, remembering Mount Pleasant had significant increases in assessed value. That's why you'll see a larger number there. Their total assessed value went up about 0.8%. So a large equalized full value assessment increase there, whereas most of the towns saw a reduction. So finally, at this point, we have a proposed tax levy of 1%. That's 447,257 below the maximum allowable. And again, over the period since the tax levy started, with this, including this year, we've been under about $2.6 million that was permissible in terms of the maximum tax levy over that period. A budget-to-budget increase of 0, a flat increase, and then a total budget of 94,534, 535. And again, our next presentation will be April 21st. It says a budget adoption. We do have the option. Again, the postponement of our election has just taken place. So we're kind of waiting on a timeline from the governor's office going forward. Right now we have scheduled for budget adoption. We'd have that option to do so, or I believe we're going to be able to extend that and have further discussions. Obviously, when I find that information, received, I'll of course let you know. But
that would also kick out budget hearing 5 by a couple of weeks.
Yeah, right. Once that timeline gets established in terms of when the vote is, it's gonna be kind of a work backwards in terms of where we need to adopt and where we need to have hearings, because there's timelines associated with that. I think the adoption has to be between 14 and 21 days prior to the budget vote, and I believe the budget hearing has to be between 7 and 14 days. So once we find out that date, we'll kind of push it back and have those available in terms of our next presentations. And then finally, this presentation will be on the website. If you have any questions, feel free to give me an email, and then review the other presentations if you like to compare. It might be easier that way, but yeah, if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, I would just mention, Kelly, and thank you for the presentation, that I think you summarized some of the items that we were focused on in finance advisory around just making sure our cash balances are safe, and then trying to reduce down these discretionary expenses, getting the tax levy lower. The other thing just to mention that you highlighted is this state aid number, and hopefully we will know in the next 24, 48 hours, but more than ever, it's a question, and there's sort of two questions that hopefully we'll get answers to tomorrow. One is, does that state aid stay at the same level that it was last year, which remains to be seen. And then secondly, will the state give a definitive number to us for the year, or is there any concept of that number, there being any risk in that number changing, which is a concept that was floated out there just given the uncertainty at the state level around tax receipts. So I think those are the two things that we'll be looking for. Hopefully we'll get those answers in 24, 48 hours, and then we'll have sort of that other piece to our budget a little bit more certain than it is right now.
Right. Yeah, there is a lot of theories coming out from the governor's office, and it's kind of unclear at this point, and there's been a lot of interpretations, but I would just caution for us to just wait until we get definitive answers to some of these questions in terms of timeline for the budget vote, and then again the state aid.
Yep.
Any other questions?
No, Kelly, that's great. And just for the public and for parents, we had a meeting with our principals today. And when we feel that this budget is ready for principals' coffees, we will put together, wherever we are at that point with the budget, we'll put together a presentation to be shown on the principals' coffees. And Kelly and I will be live also to talk about, potential continual changes in the budget.
Anybody else have any other questions? All right. Why don't we go to staff reports?
Okay. I did mention that the executive order postponed school board elections and budget votes until at least June 1st. I am excited that Tim will be talking about our e-learning journey after me today a little bit. And there's been conversation with the board about Tim putting together a little video clip for the community so that parents can see the work behind the scenes in this e-learning experience. So thank you, Tim. NYSED has given us a clarification that, and I will be announcing this in a blast to the community tomorrow morning regarding spring break and the continuity of instruction. So parents can expect to receive my email blast tomorrow. And the board and I have had discussions about this, and I'm grateful for those discussions. So one thing that I want to say is that I am waiting. We're all waiting for a lot of answers. So right now we are still waiting for the New York State Education Department. And, you know, this is evolving. When I say we're waiting, it's not necessarily waiting with impatience. It's just waiting because every 2 weeks is a new reality for us, whether schools are extended or not. So, of course, we're waiting from the governor at some point to determine if schools will continue to have this e-learning protocol moving forward and for how much longer. As soon as we find that out, we will be sharing this with the public. From New York State Ed, I'm waiting to find out about, you know, APPR. Of course, we're waiting on the budget, the federal and the state funds, and this extension of school. So as this information comes to us, we will be sharing it with the public. Sometimes these are things that decisions can be made at a district level, and sometimes they aren't. Sometimes it is an executive order. So we'll be sure to share that information with the public. And I want to commend our administrators and teachers' families for their morning announcements. I'm not sure if any of the board members have had chances to see Chris Walsh in his kitchen every day giving some announcements, and teachers with their children doing the Pledge of Allegiance, announcing birthdays. Keeping up spirit at the high school with a spirit week, with kids sending in pictures of themselves for pajama day and for pet day with your pet and a bunch of other things. And just trying to keep this sense of community alive, which is fantastic for kids. I want to commend 3 different groups right now. First, our Global Scholars group, Mike Sanders, who's also been a part of this effort. But the Global Scholars group was asked by a parent in the community to do a public service announcement to collect masks and gloves and supplies for medical workers. And there have been 2 setups of boxes, one outside of Mike's home and one outside of the parents' home. And the Global Scholars kids did a public service announcement, and they have collected quite a few supplies. I'm grateful to that parent who's an emergency provider for the community. I'm grateful to all of our parents, many of our parents who are in those professions where they are going out to help others right now, and grateful to the kids in Global Scholars and the Sanders family for helping to support the collection of these necessary items. It's great that we can continue to do that in what we called a drop and go format. For families.
Thank you, Jen. I would just mention, and thank you to the community. We had almost 2 large garbage bags, black garbage bags full of masks, gloves, Lysol, just unbelievably generous outpouring. And those got brought on Sunday to several of the local hospitals. That's
great. And it was probably a good excuse for a kid to get out in their car and drive by Mike's house and open the window and drop something in a black bag. It was one opportunity to go do something outside of the home. But anyway.
Probably not the first time, right, Mike?
Yep. And a special thanks to the parent in the community who initiated that. The second group, I would like to thank first an anonymous parent for the first round of gift cards to some families who were in need in the school district that were received within the first week and a half that we were out of school. Just a generous parent who called, and we were able, through our list of students who are receiving some assistance through the school via the lunch program, identify some families. And I want to thank the PTSA, who gave a second round of gift cards to DeChico's. And I was able to contact 8 families through that effort, and they went and we're very grateful to the PTSA and our school community for that. As we all know, many families are experiencing very different crises depending upon the family. And then the last piece, which is some great news to share with the community. Some of you have heard that 2 seniors in the Authentic Science Research Program participated in the Junior Science and Humanities Symposium virtually. And the day ended with Owen Skrilloff and Sam Aberman being awarded first place in their respective virtual rooms in physical and computational science and biochemistry, respectively. And Sam Aberman then placed 5th in the state, and Owen Skrilloff took 2nd place in the state. Owen received a scholarship from the U.S. Army, Navy, and Air Force, and both young men will now compete at the national level. Owen is going to be a speaker, and Sam is going to be presenting his poster. So just congratulations to Owen and Sam and all of that hard virtual work. We're really proud of you, and although you can't go to school and receive the accolades of your classmates and teachers, we are incredibly proud of you for the work that you're doing and want to recognize you here tonight. So congrats to those two. And to all of the teachers involved in the science research program, Stephanie Greenwald, Dr. Caroline Matthew, Megan Salamone, Rhonda Santini, and to all of the teachers who helped to prepare these students with their presentations before we had social distancing. So congrats, and that is a great way for me to end my report.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's awesome. Tim?
Sure. I'm not muted, am I? Let me check. No.
Nope.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jen. And I'll just pick up with a quick student recognition from our Global Scholars group that might have gotten lost in the last couple of weeks in the media. It did get some attention, which was that our students in the year 2, you might recall that our teachers put together a census project, and the kids were working on that during the first quarter. And they had put out a public service announcement that was done in Spanish, working with Mount Kisco, and they worked with community groups in Mount Kisco and with the mayor. And our students were really proud of all the work they put together to actually create this. That got some attention, and I want to congratulate them as well. I want to provide an update on e-learning in Byram Hills and the progress we're making and the work that's happening. I'll talk about 4 issues. There's 2 issues from the district-wide perspective I think is important for our community to understand. I'll give some update on the professional learning happening behind the scenes. And then I'll talk about some specific steps at each building. And then an update on state tests and AP, which is basically there's not an update at this time, but we're expecting it soon. So first, as we're proceeding with e-learning, I want to be certain that we're not in this digital Wild West, that we're just opening everything up. And actually, New York State has made it clear that we still have to uphold and enforce the privacy policies. We don't want to open our kids up to risk, and we have to abide by a lot of standards around digital content. So we have to, monitor digital classrooms and restrict those who, to only those who should have access. There's been a lot of press recently with Zoom bombing, and I know some of these video conferencing companies are putting in some protections. So we're training on how to use those and making sure the district is only approving those that we know follow some of the protection acts that are in place. We have to make sure when we're doing live interaction and even asynchronous that our students have access to the digital materials, and that our tech staff has always been working around the scene and spending hours with families to make sure that we resolve any issues. We have to make sure that we have appropriate sign-in provisioning to make sure that we still have administrative control over the almost 600 Chromebooks that we deployed and the use of our learning management system. All of our technologies have to adhere to the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, known as FERPA, and also the Children's Internet Protection Act, known as SIPA, and then the recently passed Education Law 2D. We still have to enforce those, and the state was very clear that we can only approve those that follow those protections. So an example is that students' faces and names are considered educational records. So when we're doing a Google Meet, and if your name shows up and someone takes a screenshot of that and post it on social media, that would be a problem for us. So those are some of the issues that we have to address and work throughout our entire system as we're immediately converting to this digital environment. Another important piece is that we are still enforcing our code of conduct. So conduct of behavior online and in the virtual environment is the same as it would be in our schools, and also our authorized user agreement that everyone signs. I want to highlight one item to our community, and that is our code of conduct prohibits the sharing of content that our students receive, such as teacher assignment or an assessment, or even a video a teacher makes. These should not be shared or published on social media. These are meant for, it's our classroom now. It's our classroom content. So our digital content should not be shared. And that's just a reminder that we have to we'll enforce and follow up on if we find any violations of that. That's one area to talk about that is really important, and there's so much behind the scenes that we have to ensure as we roll out some new digital technologies. With respect to our curriculum, our teachers are behind the scenes in many ways working on our curriculum. I've been in my current position for 10 years overseeing curriculum district-wide and have worked really hard to build a carefully designed program that focuses student learning deeply on topics. We always approach curriculum very carefully. So we still want to approach it carefully, but quickly, I understand. And teachers are working to adapt and revise their curriculum, and we have created a lot of subcommittees that teachers are constantly working on, managed by either their principals or by their directors or chairpersons. So we're constantly working on that, but I want to give just an overview for our community to understand, as simple as possible, the complexity of curriculum. There's three main buckets that we think of. That's what we teach, which is the content, like what are the actual topics and content and standards that we address. There's the how we teach, and that's the instructional methods. Do we do group work? Do we lecture? How do we get kids interacting? And then there's the how we know students are learning part of it. That's assessment. So there's tests, but then there's also the interactions that happen along the way during instruction that help us make adjustments to meet individual learning needs, to challenge kids, to try to understand their thinking, not just if they got the right answer, but how they think about the answers. Those are the three main buckets of curriculum that we're trying to reinvent at the same time. So our immediate focus in this crisis when we went to online learning was just the what, or the, well, it was both the what and the how pretty quickly. It was the what content is priority. So over the weekend when we got ready for this, we were saying, well, let's just focus on review till we figure out how long this is going to be. So now we're starting to look at the current curriculum and the future curriculum. So we're working on the what, and we're also working on the how. How do we deliver this instruction now that everything is different, that I'm not in my classroom, but I'm doing it virtually? So the how is the instructional methods that we're going to use in this online environment. And then we have to start thinking about that next bucket, which is how do we know students are learning and how they're doing their own work? That assessment piece is something we're starting to plan as well at the same time. So those are the three big buckets that we have to be giving attention to simultaneously, and they each involve a lot of different components. To address those, in addition to these subcommittees meeting, I've created these two district-wide committees. One's a K-5 and one's a 6-12. The issues are slightly different there. Sort of these e-learning committees with constituents, so we can ensure that I'm hearing what the needs of teachers are and can design professional development and help them, and also to convey the district expectation. So I'm meeting with teachers in those, and each committee has already met twice since we have been closed. There are lots of other subcommittees underneath that. At the elementary grades, I could tell you we have a building advisory. There's subgroups with math. There's subgroups with ELA. Those subgroups meet, and then they go back to their grade level teams, and they meet. We also have special education teachers meeting to talk about the needs of our students with disabilities. So there's lots of components happening simultaneously throughout the day, in addition to teachers providing and delivering the content and responding to student needs and parent needs throughout the day. At the same time, special education, my final point on this portion is that we've had to give very careful thought to the way we're meeting the needs of students with disabilities. And that has been a lot of discussion and also some subcommittees meeting to be able to deliver the students meeting their IEPs, as their individualized education plans, as well as thinking about privacy issues, making sure that we're still maintaining confidentiality with students within an e-learning environment. So we've had to work through a lot of those issues at the same time. So those are two really big issues I wanted to put forward at the district level that we have to manage from kindergarten through 12th grade, from the teachers, from the student level, teachers, and the administrative level. Let me talk a little bit about professional learning. From last week to this week, we've offered over 100 workshops that range from 30 minutes to an hour and a half, so we can accommodate it in the teacher's schedule. Those workshops run from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Teachers have asked for the workshops at all different times based on their own needs and when they're available. Some of them focusing a lot on just technology skills, increasing teachers' technology skills in various technology tools. And then this week, particularly focusing on developing online learning skills. So that is the strategies we use to teach in an online environment. We've now been able to look at research on learning online, what are best practices in learning online. So if I can give a quick example, like teaching in the physical plant classroom. We actually I was trained at one point on how to conduct group work, going back to cooperative group work in the 90s, and what that was like and the strategies you use. How do you make sure you're not just putting kids in groups and having them just do the work where maybe one person's doing it and the others aren't? There are strategies you use as a teacher to make sure the learning is rich. There are conversations. You can assess individual learning as well as the group work. So how does that translate to an online environment? How do we provide a task where we can be certain students are learning learning individually, learning as a group? How do I need to change and adjust my tasks now that I'm not physically with those students? And looking at some of the best practices in an online type of environment, synchronous, which is face-to-face live interaction between teacher and student, does have advantages. It's not, however, the only way to teach, and online learning is generally not always just live instruction. In fact, when you compare a blended type of environment, blended meaning it's both live and not live, meaning kids do tasks on their own outside of the live time. Online programs that utilize both of those features, students learn more than if it's just live or if it's just individual. So we are trying to create that both synchronous and asynchronous environment so our students can have that interaction with the teacher, which is important, as well as seeing learning that is outside of the live interaction. There are benefits to that. For example, if a teacher records themselves, or they might source a video on some content explanation and then provide opportunities for students to interact with that and have some interaction with the teacher. You could think of, I know students I've spoken to that like that asynchronous ability of a recorded video because you can pause it and take some notes or think about it. You can rewind it, watch it again if you missed it. You could look at it a couple different times. So students enjoy that type of environment too, but also we know that they need that interaction. One other aspect to talk about in the learning that we're learning about is students are used to that live classroom environment, right? That's what they're conditioned to do since they're 5 years old or younger. They're not used to this type of online learning. They're used to maybe online interaction via YouTube and their friends FaceTiming, but not really learning. And what we're learning over this past couple weeks is that we have to teach students how to learn online. We have to teach students to read directions carefully and to read the content and to follow the instructions and to maybe take notes or rethink things and look at things in a different way. We used to be able to do that in real time in the classroom, and now we have to think about when I'm delivering something, students might not be getting everything or following all the instructions. It's a new habit for them. And I actually heard that from a student. I ran a student leadership board meeting with some juniors and seniors at the end of last week. And one student said exactly that fact when we were asking how things were going. She said, you know, it's also different that I'm just not used to it this way. It's not bad or it's not good. It's just very different. And I'm trying to figure that out. And that was a high school senior saying that. So I can imagine what it's like for young children. So that's some of the tools that are happening behind the scene. A couple I'll mention specifically. There's two technology tools called Flipgrid and Padlet that are ways to get students interacting to each other. Flipgrid is a way students can record something of themselves and then submit it back to the teacher if it was an assignment. It could be the way the teacher gives feedback or peers give feedback. Padlet is another good technology feature where students, it's like a bulletin board, a virtual bulletin board where students can put up items and then they can interact around that content. So let me give a few updates on the buildings and where we stand in each building. Coman Hill will be moving toward their Google Classrooms, each teacher having their own Google Classroom on Thursday. That is our plan to launch that Thursday. And we've been working with the advisories who have been then going out and working with their grade level teams so that we make sure every teacher is trained on it, every teacher knows how to do it, and every teacher will be sending out an introductory video. And our goal is in hopes that we can get some more day-to-day interaction between the teacher and the children over time. And that is our goal. So that's coming up at Coman Hill. There are just a lot of issues we were working out around the privacy issues and making sure all teachers had the experience and training in Google Classroom so they felt confident about using that new technology. If you remember those young learners, we use technology at Coman Hill, but we didn't rely on it or depend on it as much as we would at the secondary level. So it is a really new technology for both our kids and teachers to use on a regular basis. At Wampus, a lot of subcommittees happening there and also working closely with Peggy on K-5 curriculum in general so we can maintain some continuity. So more teachers have been launching now their own Google Classroom this week, and there will be more ongoing interaction between the teacher and the students at Wampus. We're also, Peggy and I are training the teachers now on two technology components of our new math program. So we'll be able to continue to use investigations, but use the digital content. We have our specialists working on that now. They're training. They will turnkey that to, we have a math committee, and then the math committee will go out and train all the teachers on that. We have to rely on turnkey training for this. So we're excited about that. We're still exploring some digital content and literacy. And then Peggy and I are starting to plan the science and social studies piece, and we have some planning at the beginning stages of that work. At Crittenden, Angela and Kim have been speaking to teachers about possible a more structured time for kids throughout the day. I'm going to hesitate to use the word schedule, but it's a type of blocking of time where teachers will have some sessions, whether live or recorded, that kids will be working on throughout the day. The teachers had to spend some time organizing how that would work via their teams. And then we're hoping to roll that out in the week to come. And then we're also looking at doing more interaction between students at the middle school. And I think that structure will be good. I know I spoke with Kim that some clubs are meeting as well. The SAIL Club and VIP are both meeting. So we're trying to also create that social interaction for students. And then at the high school, having the same conversation about time. It's coming up because some students are starting to have conflicts as more teachers are doing live sessions. So we're talking about the use of time at the high school. More and more teachers are using video conferencing, and the feedback I received from the juniors and seniors last week is they really like that time. So we're talking more about that type of structured time. In terms of a blended type of environment, I can give an example of a science lesson. So I did see a chemistry lesson where Mr. Borneman recorded a video that was about a 5 to 7 minute explanation of some content. And then the students had a list of various activities to follow after watching that. Some, they had to submit some content back to the teacher so he could assess learning. Students also had choice along the way. So it wasn't that every student had to do, there were some required pieces that every student had to do, but then some choice built in. And that is a way to differentiate for the various learning needs. And then the teacher would have a live session to follow up, clarify, do some small group instruction. So that is a model that Mr. Borneman with Miss Budden have been working on for a while within their classroom context already. So they were really ready for this type of environment. That's an example of a type of structure that seems to be working really well, and we're getting good feedback on that. Some other examples in physical education, we launched this last year, was a fitness app that they're using in the physical education classes at the middle and high school where students do physical activity. And that data is recorded and actually given back to the teacher. So the teacher can see who's doing what and then give feedback to those students. And our coaches are also using that app as well. I know some clubs are also meeting at the high school. And I just want to encourage our family members, if there are particular issues or concerns with the content, with the instructional aspect or your child's learning needs, contact the classroom teacher or contact the building principal. We are adapting and responding every day as we learn to interact in this environment. So I know we took a 10-year curriculum we were building and had to flip it in a couple of weeks to this new environment. And we want to keep learning and adapting it and getting better every day. In terms of state tests and APs, we are awaiting, we were told by State Ed that there'd be some guidance this week on Regents exams. We have not received that yet. And we also expect to hear from the College Board on April 3rd or by April 3rd about APs. At the high school, we did decide that we will continue to administer the AP exams. Mr. Walsh met with all of the administrators, the departments who administer them and their teachers, and decided we felt confident we could we could deliver this content and that our students would be prepared. The College Board is shortening the exams. They'll be 45 minutes. They will be provided online, and they're only covering content through March. So that is a good sign for us. The teachers felt confident that we would be able to prepare students. They also say they're going to offer two versions, one at the regularly scheduled time and then a later one. College Board has also provided some free content as well, but our teachers felt confident that we could still administer this. Once the April 3rd information comes out from the College Board, we'll take a look at the content and work out some more details. I covered a lot, so I will stop at that to see if there's any content or if you're tired of me speaking.
Tim, we're never tired of your speaking.
I am. You can hear my voice good.
Never, Tim, never.
7 a.m.
That is great information for the community to know all of the different layers and components, particularly taking a teacher's lesson and breaking it down for us like that, showing us that this is how we manage learning, teaching and learning on a regular day. So transposing to this platform is not as easy as one might imagine. And let's not kid ourselves. No one ever predicted that we would sit here and say, oh my gosh, this e-learning is so much better than what we do in school, right? Nobody ever thought that was going to happen. But we see the different levels that you're trying to reach with this. I applaud your work and the teachers and administrators' work in trying to get to those very good lessons and not just opening up sessions for kids to have conversations. It's really meaningful. Thank you. And I'm sure the parents in the community will love to see that broken down for them in a video.
Agreed.
Thank
Can't wait.
Yeah, that's just so thorough, Tim, in terms of taking us through the granularity, and it just shows you how much goes into thinking through this transition and how you're being incredibly thoughtful about it. So we appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions?
Just congratulations, no questions. It's a great presentation.
Yeah,
Thank you.
excellent. So any other administration reports? Otherwise, we can go to board reports. All right. So
I have a question only because it falls under the 9.3 or 9.4. The FOIL request that we got, is this a typical? Is this something we will respond to? Are they entitled to this information? I mean, maybe if it's a legal matter, you can hold off on it. But I looked at it and I said, this struck me as a little bit of an unusual FOIL request. So I'll leave it at that and just make sure before we
don't make any decisions about FOIL requests without referring to our attorneys. So any FOIL requests that we fulfill or don't fulfill are based upon that guidance.
Yeah, but this to me looks almost politically motivated, but putting that aside, I just don't know if they're entitled to the information, but I certainly would defer to counsel on it. That's all. It struck me as a little unusual.
yeah, no, good point. All right. So on board reports, I just have a few things to mention. One is that for the last, I guess it's been 3 weeks, and it's going to happen again this week. And this week, actually, Lara's going to do it because I have a conflict. There's been a call with either board presidents in Westchester Putnam County and or their designees, other members of the board, when they can't make it. And the purpose of it is really to just try to understand issues that various districts are facing. And it's useful not because we're going to do what others do. We're going to make our own decisions, of course, but it's helpful from an advocacy standpoint because it gets out issues that are important to us to understand, whether it's from the state education department or the health department or the governor's office or our legislators. And then that gives a forum to really, try to go into those decision makers with serious questions that really make a difference to our district. And so we'll continue to participate in that. And then, of course, it does give us a sense of information about what others are working on as well. So it's a good shared best practice. Second thing is that I would say that we did get some inquiry, understandably, of things that normally would be routine, like our calendar, whether it was for spring break next week, which Jen mentioned, or even for that matter, is anything going to be impacted toward the end of the year? And the honest answer is, like, some of this stuff is out of our control at this point. The state is going to let us know about regents. They're going to let us know if there are other calendar issues that they want to flag. And as soon as we have that information, we will obviously share with the community. But just want to just make sure that everyone understands that some of these issues are not in our control. And then last point is, I think as I kind of reflect and kind of take a high level view of everything that's happening, we've got a district where I think it's fair to say that our parent community has a real commitment to excellence and high expectations. And then we have a faculty and administration and staff that have a commitment to excellence and have high expectations of themselves. And we're all of us are thrust into this situation that is very suboptimal. A, because of the challenges that online learning puts upon us. B, because there are all kinds of issues that families face, whether it's families of staff members or of students, whether it be financial, whether it be health related, whether it be mental health related. There are just so many things going on in everyone's life. And I think that, what I would say, just taking that high level view, is the way that we're going to get through this is with patience and also a sense of community and pulling together and focusing on the fact that there are really some awesome things happening, despite all of the things that will continue to need to be improved upon and worked out. But listening to the fact that there are now clubs that are meeting in the middle school and the high school, listening to science research continuing to win awards, listening to these collections going on, whether it's the gift cards and or the PPE. I mean, those are really just great examples of how we can all pull together. So I would just say that we will need to do more of that in the coming days because we'll face more challenges. But I'm confident that we can pull through, and it'll still be the same Byram Hills that we know and love, just right now in a slightly different form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have a question. Hold on. Oh yeah, I have a question, which is graduation. Has anyone looked at our agreement we have with SUNY Purchase about whether we have a force majeure clause or what notice we have to give them or potential cancellation? I don't look for the answers, just as long as somebody's looking at that, just to make sure that the district's covered.
Yep, my office is looking at that right now. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We haven't made the full payments yet, so.
Well, I just don't know what right we have to, cancel if we're going to, and I don't want to suggest we are, just something we have to look at because it's April, May, we're 10, 11 weeks away from graduation. It's not that far away anymore.
I think if for graduation, we told the kids that they could run freely on the school grounds, they're very happy to do that and grab a diploma on the way out.
Well, that's used to be graduations on what is now the football field, soccer field. That's where we used to have graduations at Byram Hills. So we'll see.
We're looking at all the contracts we've signed and seeing what the language says right now. So
I'm optimistic they'll have the graduation, but who knows? I'm optimistic it'll happen.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any reports?
I would just like to chime in briefly, Scott.
Sure.
Scott, thanks for the leadership during this difficult time, and Jen and your team. We're all navigating this challenging time to the best that we can. And I'm happy to be supportive to the district, and with your leadership, Scott, the board, we've had a number of serious discussions over the last couple of weeks, and I think we're all doing our best to react, adapt, and to drive our district in the best direction we can. So just a little thank you to you as well.
No, I appreciate that, and I thank all of you for your teamwork and collaboration, as well as our administration for their teamwork and collaboration, because that really is what's going to get us through this, and everybody's work is appreciative. All right. So with that, why don't we go to communications to the board? I received 4. One was, or actually more than one, was on the topic of spring break, which Jen covered because that was timely. One was on general calendar questions, which we mentioned, and then one was on sort of the structure of e-learning. So with that, I would ask for a motion to approve the Board of Education minutes from both the March 3rd and March 17th meetings.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, and then motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Stay safe, everybody.
All right.
Yeah,
everybody
be
stay
well.
you.
All together. Safe.
Stay safe.
Aye.
Good night.
43.